on this computer. So I'm going to fork this over. Oh, did I already do it? All right. So I already forked it over. I'm going to git clone it down to my machine. So I'm still in Words. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to move up one level in my directory, cd ... git clone school interface 1. Now I'm going to ls to list everything, school interface 1. I'm going to cd into school interface 1. I'm going to open this into a new window. And for this one, I know we haven't been doing this when we probably should have or should be, is creating new branches in our code or in our Git. So right now we're on the master branch. I want to actually change a branch to like school interface 1 branch. How do I go ahead and create a new branch? Does anybody know the command?
Git checkout -b and then the branch name.
Checkout -b and then the branch name. Release, I'll say part 1 or school interface part 1. And now I'm on a new branch, school interface part 1. My code still has not changed because I haven't changed anything. And now I'm working on a clean branch. So I can get status, see nothing to commit, working on clean tree. All right. So let's go through what we're building. As mentioned yesterday, this is a multi-day project. If you ever want to see what the next day, like what the end result of this is, you can literally just go into school interface 2, and it already kind of has the expected output from yesterday's challenge. So if you ever need some guidance on what it kind of should look like, you can look ahead. So we're at school interface 1. So what we're essentially building a high school interface that you're able to list students, view individual students, add students, and remove a student as well. You can also expand on this to staff members, and pretty much you can just continue building upon this and see anything, whether it's grades, it just depends. So for this challenge, we'll be building a simple interface for a school that will keep track of student records. There are many ways to create the functionality we are looking for, and you should feel free to experiment beyond the scope of this tutorial. All right. So let's just kind of look at the data, the files that we have. We have a school file where it has a class school, but nothing's in there. And then we also have a runner file. You're going to start seeing this more frequently, these runner files. This is literally just a file where you enter your application. This is what you run to test your application. Not to test your application, to actually run your application. All right, then we also have data, this data directory, which has some staff CSV and a student CSV. We have, in the students, we have name, age, role, school ID, and password. In staff, we have name, age, role, employee ID, and password. All right, cool. And I just want to emphasize something. If there's anywhere if you ever encounter a CSV that has like employee space ID in the header, feel free to underscore it. You can change like this in the future. So if it's like multiple words, feel free to combine them with an underscore. Wink, wink, you might see that on Friday or something. And it could, if you don't know that you can change that, it could cause real problems. So school ID, runner ID, or I'm sorry, runner, school. All right. So our files, right now we only have 2 Python files. Okay, notice we import statement at the top. Just looking at the runner. Okay, so we're importing the school class from the school Python file, and we're instantiating a new school called Richmond High, and then we're printing the school name. So I just want to run this runner. Oh, so it says school takes no arguments. All right, not yet, apparently. So school, because there's nothing that we're doing it with the school class yet. So with that. So release 0, create all your classes. So we'll start by initializing our school with a name. Feel free to add other attributes as well. So we need to initialize this with init under self and then name. And then do we do self.name equals name? Is that what they say? Yep. And then self.students equals empty array, and a self.staff equals an empty array. So here is where we're going to be storing student objects and staff objects in our school. So the goal is to instantiate a new student instance for every student and add it to this array. All right, and then it says students and staff. Okay, so we're gonna have to create 2 new files. Touch student.py and staff.py. I'm gonna code student staff. So I opened student and staff here. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to close all this stuff. I'm going to split the screen and see what I need to bring in. So class student. I'm sure I'm going to def my init. I'm sure I'm going to need something in here, but I don't know yet. I'm going to pass. I'm going to copy this over to staff and just reassign it to staff. All right, so it looks like student and staff need name, age, role, school ID, and password. Where does that come from? That comes from the headers in the CSV. So it looks like in the students, I need name. So I'm literally grabbing this stuff right here. Name, so I guess I'll copy that. Name, age, role, school ID, password. Should add some spaces, just make it a little more readable. And then self.name equals name, self.age equals age, self.role equals role, self.school ID, and then self.password equals password. And I'm going to bring that over here, close that, and I'm going to essentially do the same thing with staff. So instead of school ID, it's employee ID. Does everyone see what I just did right now? What questions do you have about me creating the student and staff class? I'm grabbing the necessary parameters, or I'm creating these parameters based off of what I need in my staff and student CSV file. All right. Let's go back to students and staff. So you could just copy this. It said, oh, that's a lot of repeated code. There's got to be a way to refactor this. Looks like right now students and staff only differ when it comes to how their IDs are stored and labeled. As our program develops, we may discover other differences, so it's a good idea to keep these separate classes, but we do want to keep our code dry as possible. What does dry stand for? It's an acronym.
Do not repeat yourself.
Yep, don't repeat yourself. So, this is totally fine. You can continue on in the application, keep on programming without, you can just keep on going and not really change a whole lot. And it'll still work, but we want to keep our code dry and as it mentioned, a lot of this is repeated code. We'll be fine. So with that, it says, let's create a person class and move any shared attributes there. Then set up your staff and school classes so that they inherit from person. We haven't talked about inheritance yet. We will be talking about that a little today, but you can kind of read about it a little bit here. Just think about it as, as a family, like I inherit traits from my mom and dad, but I cannot pass those traits back up to them. I can only inherit downward from parent to child. So I'm going to type in Python and inheritance example. So I don't necessarily know. Oh, cool. So here's kind of an example, create a class. So we have this class person. This is kind of like exactly what we're doing. Interesting. And then we inherited it as student. Okay. And student. And it looks like we can, all right, here's a good example actually. All right, so let's go ahead and create another file called person.py. I'm going to code person.py. And I'm going to bring that over here. I'm going to split the screen for person. I'm going to class person. Def. Pretty much everything is the same except for the employee ID and school ID there. So I'm going to do that and then get rid of school ID. And then I'm just looking at this example. So student inherits from person class. So I'm going to, from person, import person. And that looks like in here, I type person. And what I inherit all these attributes from person into student. So I actually don't need this name, age, role. I don't need any of that now. But now how do I invoke the person class and input this name, age, role, school ID, and password into here? So if I look at this example, just scrolling down, add properties. So it looks like I can do this. Person init. Looks like I have to take in self, and then in the same order, I take in name, age, role, and then also password. Oh, geez, what did I do? All right, that looks right. Let's test this. I'm going to create a new student. Student equals student. I'm going to say Tom. I'm very old. 88. Role student. ID 123. Password. I'll just do password. Does that make sense? So I'm passing the name, age, student, school ID, and password. So if I actually run the student Python student, let's see if anything breaks. So nothing broke, that's good. Now let's print student, or new student. New student, let's see what we get. So we get a student object, And am I able to pass name, age, role, school, ID? I just want to make sure that I still have these attributes in the student instance. Cool. Does anybody kind of see, or does everyone see how, from a syntactical perspective, how student inherits from person? So I'm importing the person class. I'm putting in person inside the parentheses in the student class. And now when I create a new student, comes into here, I pass in all these attributes or these arguments, name, age, role, and then I invoke the person class by calling person.init, pass in the self, and I'm passing in the name, age, role, so it comes into here, assigns name, age, role, and password. Now,
syntactically, can you do it the same way by calling and using the super?
Yep.
And calling the super. Okay.
So with that, it works fine. But let's go down to this example. We have person, the super function that will make the child class inherit all the methods and properties from its parent. So the person class is the parent of the student class. And for example, if I'm like, my application's huge and I decide for whatever reason to change my person class, I'd have to go everywhere and change, like if I change this to like anything else, anything or something else, I'd have to go over here and also change that, as well as over here, like also when I'm importing. So the super, if I do super invoke it, I don't need the self anymore, because it says just inherit everything from the parent class, and the parent is person because I'm passing it in via the parentheses. So let's see if this still works. Yep, still works. So it's just less code I'll have to change in the future. Just no matter whatever this person class or whatever my parent, if my parent ever changes, I just automatically inherit everything from my parent by invoking the super. All right, so we've done that with students. Now we have to do that with staff. So I can pretty much, I'm going to copy this over. Well, I'm going to get rid of all that. I don't need the password. I need to import from person, import person. I need to I need staff to inherit from the person class. So that's what's happening on line 3. Now I need to invoke the init. I essentially have to initialize a new person by passing in name, age, role, password. Cool. And we can test that as well by doing new staff equals staff, Tom, age, role, teacher, employee ID 87, password is XXX. There we go. I can print the new staff. Just gonna copy that over. Just want to make sure it in fact works. Employee ID. So I'm down here in the console, clearing it, and I'm going to run the staff. There we go. Still works. I'm going to delete that. delete that and jump back to my README to make sure we can move on to the next step. Does anybody have any questions? This part's a little tricky.
Hey, Tom,
Yep.
I got the gist of why to use super. It's so that whenever your parent class changes that you want to use it, but I didn't quite catch the details of it. I just got the main point of it.
So it's just another keyword or method that the super, this is also, you'll see this in JavaScript as well. You just, it ensures that you inherit all the methods and attributes from the parent class. That's literally all it is.
Okay, so now you mentioned something about if it changed, you wouldn't have to make no changes anywhere else or something.
Right. So instead of doing like person, I'd have to end using the self keyword here. I don't have to make, if this person class or if this student parent ever changed, I wouldn't also have to change it here.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, you'll see super a lot. Well, depending on how you'll see it again in JavaScript, specifically in React. And it means the same thing here or in JavaScript as it does here. All right. All right, it says refactor with Dict and Kwargs. I didn't necessarily like doing this part because, yeah. Do you want me to do this part of the release? Yeah, I mean, I guess it's part of the release. All right. So with staff and students, I can, instead of having to pass in name, age, role, school ID, and password all in the same order every single time, I only have to necessarily pass in name, age, role, and password as a keyword argument or as a dictionary. So with that, and the reason why we want to use, not always the reason, but it'll come in handy when we start creating instances of this person. So covered it yesterday. The Kwargs changes it into a keyword argument, so kind of like a dictionary. So for the name, age, role, and password and person, I just want to do, so this would be Kwargs, but I want to do, I don't want to name it Kwargs. I want to name it person info. And then down here, we can assign it, like how do we add instances, these as instance variables? How do we extract the person info, the keyword arguments, and assign them to instance variables?
For me, the easy way is you're going to access them from a dictionary, but to get all the lines done at once, I basically went to the end. Basically I was able to edit multiple lines all at once, but for each line in the self.name, self.age, after the equals, you're going to go ahead and put person underscore info bracket or open bracket, and then it's so good, open bracket, and then quote for the key. Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, and then I was able to somehow manage to get it all done at once. I don't know how to do it in a Mac, but so.
Let's see if this works. I haven't done this one before, like this. And then we'll test it. Oh, we got name, age, role, password. We can actually test it by creating a new person. say Tom equals a dictionary, name, Tom, age, role, can say like student for right now, and password equals, all right. So we can create a new person instance. And when we bring it in as an argument, we can do Tom. And let's see if this works. We have new person. I'm going to print new person dot name. Is that how it works? Yep. So I'm going to clear it. So I'm just doing this to remove some code so I don't have to actually pass in the arguments in the same order every single time. So clear. And so I'm going to run the person file. Sweet. So that works. Name, age. I just want to double check everything. I like running my code a lot. Password. Clear. All right. Looks like that worked.
So Tom, is the strength of this args and kwargs to be able to programmatically open up new instances? So, I mean, you could technically, instead of just saying Tom equals that dictionary, you could start reading your student or staff CSV and passing that and making a new instance of student or staff for every row in your CSV. Is that what we're getting at here?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So that's one benefit of using the kwargs and the dict aspect. It can it'll make your life a little bit easier if you want to go down this route. But it is because we're going to be using the dict reader, which creates keyword arguments, or essentially a dictionary, an ordered dictionary, and we're able to pass that dictionary into the student class, or creating a new student class, which then passes everything down. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I don't think I probably framed it so anybody else can understand it. Thanks.
No, you're good. All right.
Were you going to be able to show, I guess, the other method? Because you said this way you never tried it before. I just want to make sure, because I'd like to learn the other way.
So actually, I was thinking about this like at 4 o'clock this morning about this, and it's not the best way, because when I initially did it, so I did it like, what is it? Self dot, I think I showed it like dict, and then person info. Actually, I'm going to go back just to get this stuff up here. So I'm going to comment that out. If I do self dot dict, is it dot update? And I pass that person info in here. I think that's how it goes. And if I run the person, it still works. Now it's a lot less code. However, an issue will arise when I'm passing in a dictionary that also includes the school ID down. So if I pass this into student, create a new student instance, it's going to pass all this information down to person. And so it's also going to create a school ID instance variable within the person class, which I don't want to do. it'll essentially kind of be duplicate. There'll be like duplicate. There'll be a school ID in the student class, and then also a school ID in the person class, which I don't want. So I actually like this way better. And there's another way we can solve that. Instead of doing the dict like that. Oh, sorry. One way, not my favorite. This is most optimal. This is the most optimal way because it knows specifically what instance variables exist within the person class. And then there's also this another way. I forgot how it went. For key, was it value and was it
Items. Well, it's the name of the dictionary.
person info items?
Dot items. Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that as another possibility, because then what you're basically doing is you're looking up the key.
Yeah,
but
we can
then
do
it's-
like if
so it'd be
like school ID or key equals employee ID, or if it doesn't equal, so then you can create an attribute. And we're going to get to this just to kind of show you, what is it? Set attribute, self, key value. So for example, if I literally just did this, which loops through, grabs all the items in the person info dictionary, it's school, it shouldn't be school ID, it should be. So essentially this, so even though this has a school ID, it shouldn't actually create one. So if I print new person, well, we'll get to that. So this should technically still work. So yep, still works, but it doesn't include the school ID. So if I literally try to print school ID, it should break. Oh, it still worked. Why didn't it do it? I just wanted to see something. Why did it add it? I don't know. We're kind of going down the rabbit hole right now. I haven't tried.
And there, you need an and there, not an or. Because if it doesn't equal school ID,
Oh, you're right. Thank you. There we go. Thank you.
So now your challenge is you've tightly coupled the person class to other classes, though.
Right.
Or the person class doesn't care very much about school or ID, right?
Yep, you're 100% right. So this is also not the optimal way, because there's thing like you just said, you're coupling the person class to the some other class that it literally should know nothing about.
so especially if you add, somehow you end up adding some other instance in that other class. So for me, I'm thinking the more optimal way would be similar to looping. So you create a list of all the a list of strings for all the attributes that you want.
Yep.
And now you go through for that list. If that key exists, import it. Otherwise, don't.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. But that also works. But just kind of keep it easy.
Tom, on the args and the kwargs thing, so is there a best practice? It seems like in the person class, we should have spelled out the interface there. for the parameters. And then if we wanted to use args and kwargs and in the child classes, we'd be okay. But I don't know, am I way out to lunch on that? Seems like the parent class should have a well-defined interface there.
As opposed to just this like kwargs right here.
Right. If you want to use kwargs or args, do it in your child classes all you want, but in the parent class, spell them out. And
Oh yeah,
I
you
don't
can.
know if there's tooling reasons and tooling right downstream that matters. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's definitely just personal preference. I liked it this way just because in my instance variable or in my init, I can see kind of what arguments need to be passed in. But you're 100% right. You can actually define the. Well, we can. I don't want to go too far down that route because it might mess. It could potentially like provide some issues. But once we go down, as we move forward from here, I'm going to adjust the student and the staff class to also accept, the kwargs. But yeah, it's also. Oh, go ahead.
I think if you get wrapped around the axle too much about like, okay, I have extra information in my person object, which it really isn't a person object because you're using a subclass of a person object. Now you're going against the whole point of inheritance is to reduce writing code. So writing code to account for all these exceptions and stuff works against that. So when you can just plop your person info kwargs, if you modify a subclass, you never have to modify the parent class. If you're too concerned about that, now you got to modify a bunch of classes at once, which is more maintenance and overhead, not less, which is what this is supposed to do. Besides, if you instantiate a student's going to have a student ID, and if the person part of it is the student subclass still has a person ID as part of that object. You're not instantiating a person per se. You're instantiating. I don't know if this makes any sense. I'm kind of talking in circles, but I don't think it matters. Is what I'm trying to say. And you don't want to create more code to maintain.
Right. No, yeah, that makes sense.
That was kind of the gist of my question. Much appreciated. I'm just trying to kind of figure out what's the optimal flow here. If we're using, I was kind of thinking of more like API documentation, right? Where does that come from if we're auto-generating that? But that's way down the rabbit hole. So,
yeah. All right. Good questions. Let's keep going. So we eventually want to just pass in like student info like that. So how do we student info? So we can modify this. This is the way I did it. I had the student, what is it? School ID here. And then I take in like student info, which essentially is like the person info. And then I can pass that person info, something like that. I want to get the student stuff back. I'm going to bring that over here. So in the student, I have got the person info as keyword arguments, but I also have this very first parameter called school ID. There's other ways. I'm sure there's other ways to do it. This is just what I kind of, the decision I've chosen. So if I wanted to create a new student, I can do new student equals student. Let's see if this works. If I do, I just want to see if this works. Tom, new student dot name. And if the name works, then I'm sure Everything else works, but I also want to test the ID. LS clear. So I'm passing in. Oh, here we go. No, because we can just do the same thing like we did over here. This is what I like to do. Optimizing on the fly. Well, student info. Person info would be student info. And school ID. This should work. Does everyone kind of see what I did?
Yeah, that method will definitely work. I was actually curious to see if the other one would break, because you'd be trying to put in a positional argument, the school ID earlier. But yeah, this I know works.
Yeah. But if I do school, yeah, let's just run this first to see if it works. Clear, Python, student. All right. And if I do student ID, if this works, and yeah, no. So yeah, I would need a positional argument. 1, 2, 3. That works like that. So let's go back. So we're passing in a dictionary, Tom, that has name, age, role, password, including the school ID. We're passing it in here, keyword arguments. We're flowing that through to the person as well, which right here uncouples it, and it only extracts the name, age, role, and password. Doesn't do anything with the school ID. But right here, it accesses the school ID from the dictionary and assigns it to an instance variable there. So we can do staff as well. Just convert that over. We can call it staff info. Staff info. Staff info. Staff info. And that should all work. So we've made our code. We have less lines of code. If you follow the path, it could, like, you already know what arguments or what instance variables are associated with the student class, as well as the person class, as well as the staff class. Does anybody have any questions about how this is flowing through from the student to calling this the parent class, which is the person class, and then also assigning the name, age, role, and password?
As far as the test goes, is it going to be required to know how to do it the way we're doing it here, or if we just spell out all the parameters?
Yeah, like we don't. If you get it to work, that's number one.
Okay.
Does anybody else have another question?
Tom, I
Yep.
wanted to ask, there are 2 ways that you were doing this. I mean, I think it might be hard for me to explain, so I try to type some stuff and I maybe can ask you about it maybe a little later after this.
Yeah, we can definitely take it offline.
Okay.
Cool. All right, so refactored. Cool. Gives you a little explanation of it. Now we have to move our class. So right now, pretty much everything is all on the same level. But as your application expands, it's going to get bigger and bigger, and you want to group specific files into directories that are similar. So I just want to see. So for example, here's a node project I've been working on, and it's a bunch of different directories. We have a server direct. This is just specifically node, and all these different subdirectories. So we want to group things together. Models. So with that, we want to group our classes together, all into one directory. So we have data with our staff and student CSVs, and now we want to put our classes all into a classes directory. And I'm just going to create it using VS Code's GUI. Uh-oh, it looks like I created it. Inside there, classes, and now I can move school, staff, and students into the classes. Moved it, great. All right. Should we just, everything should still work right now. Let's continue moving forward. So the runner is at the parent level, or at the very top of the directory, right here. Actually, let's try to run clear. Let's run the runner file to see if it runs. I'm gonna close that. So if I Python runner, it says from school, import school, module not found error, no module named school. So school, the path to school is no longer on the same level as the runner file. So I need to actually go into the classes directory and then into the school file. So how that works is classes.school. Let's see if this works. Cool, that works for now. All right, next thing we need to do is load our data in from the CSV using Python CSV module. If you haven't done so already, read, okay. So write a method. It also says to do so, we'll define a class method. I'm just gonna open that up. Write a method, all students, that returns an array of student objects that represent each row in the student CSV. All right, so I need to create this all students will return an array of student objects, which I get from the student CSV. So I need to open up this student CSV. I need to read everything, and then create student objects from this data, and then add it to an array, and then return that array. So write a method that returns an array of student objects. Okay. Let's look at, and it says hint, you will need to import OS path and OS path absolute path, as well as OS path join to read from the CSV file. All right, that's interesting. So I'm just gonna copy this.
Yeah, I don't understand why that's set up that way. It's like getting an absolute path and then it's tacking on a relative path on it, making the absolute path completely redundant. I didn't quite follow along with that unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, what
ahead.
it's actually doing is, so if you're going to run this into one folder, it's going to get the absolute path to that folder. Now, if you're trying to access a different folder or a different file in a different folder, you're attaching the relative path from where you're currently at. So like for me, instead of putting my path, if you put current working directory equals OS path, so the first line there, yeah, right there. When I did it the second time through, because I worked with it yesterday, I went through that. I'm like, okay, this is just the current working directory. And then the path, the second part where it's got a dot, or it's in the quotations, the data and everything else, that's the relative path. How do you get from where you're at now to where you want to go?
So,
Without, So you're combining the absolute path to where you're at, and then you're saying also this gets me where I'm at, but I need to actually go somewhere else. So it's appending that on there.
Yeah, well,
It's a relative path, regardless of it trumps the absolute part. It's basically doing the same exact thing if you just did a relative path by itself. It's relative to where you are. So Daniel, we didn't use any of that code in our program works, and you can put it in whatever folder you want, and it's relative to the folder that it's in, so it will always work, which is the ultimate portability.
Yeah,
Python. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and then when I tried to redo it, everything, just to walk through it all again last night, you know, that ended up the relative path portion when we didn't use this, basically doing the exact same thing we did yesterday. It didn't quite work as expected. So the only way I can get it to work was actually using this method here with my path. So.
And Python runs relative to where your current working directory is. But if you back up one directory outside of that and then run Python from one directory up against your file, so you have to type Python, the subdirectory, the file name, then it will break whatever you have that's a relative path, because it will use the directory up from that as the new relative point. So it's just a way to get where the file you're trying to run as the absolute path, and then generate everything beyond that. So no matter where you call it from, it will always run. And you'll see Django uses that same thing in the settings later when we get to Django.
yeah, all this is kind of building towards how Django is set up. So I'm just gonna import up here. I'm gonna put that right there. And then it said I have to import OS. And let's just print this. I want to print my path. Let's see what that looks like. So if I list here, I've moved my classes, my student class, my staff class, and my person class. Oh wait, what? Why is person class still out here? All right. There, I moved my person class back in there. I'm going to run the student file. So cd into classes, ls, I'm clearing it. If I Python student, so it brings me directly to where this specific file is located. It's the absolute path. And then it's joining that with how to actually get to where this data is. And you heard someone saying like the relative path still works the same. So
Yeah, we got the relative path to work yesterday, just like 2 or 3 times. But then when I went back to it last night, just to kind of go through the assignment again, I couldn't get it to work again, even though we got it to work yesterday. So again, once I actually was looking into like, why is this not working? This should be working, you know, and then that's when I'm like, okay, the my path that's listed here is basically a way of printing out your current working directory, or print working directory, and returns it as a string. And then if you were to actually run the entire string like that, that would be kind of like terminal directions on how to CD into the file that you're looking for.
right.
Is another way of looking at it. So.
Yep. Yep. So we need this specifically to get to where that data is located at. Just think of it like that. All right. So I imported OS at the top. I've got my path and path variables. And now I just want to read from this student CSV file. And before we do that, let's take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:18 and we'll finish this up.